Good afternoon, everyone. To those on the East Coast, good morning to those on the West Coast. Welcome to today's webinar, Introduction to the National Council on Administrative Fellowships. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. Please mute your phones to prevent any unnecessary background noise. During the call, the participants will be muted. We will open up the phone lines for the Q&A session later on. We will be using the conference line as the audio for the call, so please also turn off your audio function in the Adobe Connect meeting or on your computer to prevent feedback. During the presentation, you can submit questions by typing into the Q&A box. You may also submit your questions throughout the conference, but we will be answering most of them during the Q&A session at the end. I would now like to introduce our presenters for today's webinar. Our first presenter is Andy Garman. He is the CEO of the National Council on Administrative Fellowships that is part of the National Center for Healthcare Leadership.
Renata, thank you very much. And since she didn't introduce herself, let me introduce Renata Costa, who we're very fortunate, to have as our NCAF program coordinator. Here in the Chicago office with me, I also have Joyce Anwanio, NCHL's VP of Operations, as well as Casey Carter, who oversees all things research for all of NCHL's portfolio programs. NCHL is an independent nonprofit 501c3. We're very pleased to serve as the home of the NCAF program, which is a program that we run in collaboration with AUPHA as well as the Commission on the Accreditation for Healthcare Management Education. So here's the plan for today, and I want to thank you all for freeing up 45 minutes to an hour of your time to learn more about NCAF. We were delighted at the level of response that we received. My understanding was 70 RSVPs from 60 organizations had RSVP'd, so some number minus a few folks who had last-minute conflicts, but a great level of enthusiasm, which we're really happy about. I'm going to spend probably just not more than 10 to 15 minutes talking about the organization itself. I want to make sure that there's some time for a couple of our long-standing members to talk about their experiences with NCAF, why they joined, why they support, and some of their perspectives as well. They will also be available during the Q&A session if you have specific questions you'd like to pose to them. And that is, as you see, Sue Boren, the Director of Academic Programs for Mizzou, and A.J. Dunn, who's the Associate Administrator for the Mayo Clinic's Fellowship Program. Well, he's Associate Administrator, and he also oversees the Fellowship Program, I should say, for the Mayo Clinic, Florida. We will then bump over to membership requirements very briefly, and then leave the rest of our hour together for Q&A. So let me start with a quick FAQ about NCHL. NCHL is a nonprofit organization. Our mission is to improve health by strengthening healthcare leadership. You can see our operating model here. We really focus on evidence-based leadership development. We look for it and we try to leverage it. If it doesn't exist, it's needed. We try and create it. And this is to push leadership excellence, which then leads to organizational excellence with the ultimate goal of improving population health. Our support is provided primarily by members. I have 100 plus here. I was again just corrected. It's more like the neighborhood of 150 or so at least organizations who support one or more of our collaborative programs, of which NCAF is one. I have also in the lower right-hand corner, so I remember to mention it, this year for the second time NCHL is going to be running its National Best Organizations for Leadership Development Award. This is an evidence-based survey process. I wanted to mention it on this call because one of the categories is the use of administrative fellowships. We had it on the survey not because there was evidence, but because we felt that it was important. We've done some research over the past year, and lo and behold, the presence and the involvement of fellowships does have a significant association with organizational outcomes, something that we're eager to talk about in coming publications and in coming webinars. So I want to put NCAF in a little bit of history. At the top of the slide, we have history of NCAF. history of NCAF really dates back to 2013, but before 2013, going all the way back to at least 2001, for those of you who have been involved with fellowships maybe throughout your career, you may know the administrative fellowship's really been a cornerstone of the healthcare management profession, going back at least 4 decades. And we know 4 decades because the Mass General program celebrated its 40th anniversary a couple of years ago. About 15 years ago, some of the larger health systems across the country got together because they were getting increasingly concerned that they were essentially undercutting each other's efforts by continuously moving the deadlines around, trying to get them earlier in the queue so everybody could get the process started faster while everybody was still available to be considered. And they recognized that this process was not only undermining each other's efforts, but it was making for a lousy experience for the students who were eager to be applying for these fellowships. Unfortunately, what happened in 2001 is the fellowship sites, when they first got an agreement together, ultimately one of the members or one of the groups pulled out kind of towards the last minute and said, you know, I think we're going to do our own thing on this one. This left kind of a bad taste in the mouths of the organizations that had attempted this effort. And it wasn't until 2012, 2013, when on the graduate program director side, Diane Howard, Anna Maria Lampera, some of their colleagues started doing some analyses to look at the student experience again. They were realizing that the students who they were preparing for these fellowships, and some of the fellowships were really excellent once they got there. The pathway to get these fellowships was really problematic. There were deadlines all over the place. There was no standardization or uniformity in the way these things were, in the way the applications ran. And what it was leading to over time was more and more students saying, you know, this is more effort than I think it's worth. I'm going to check out some of these other opportunities that I have in front of me. And the demand side was starting to decline. Some of our best students were no longer pursuing fellowship applications. What this kicked off was an effort which received philanthropic support early days from some grant money from Aspira, which we're grateful for, to do a couple of national surveys, one with the fellowship directors, one with the graduate program directors, and bring a group together, which we did in 2013, of some of the larger, some of the better established graduate programs as well as fellowship sites, to say if we brought the supply and the demand sides both to the table, we all recognize the system could be working a lot better. It could show the healthcare management profession in a much more favorable light than it was currently. We've got the right people in the room here. Can we all agree that we ought to move forward with something where we're collaborating on making this work better? What that led to was 2 things. The one was a recognition we needed some kind of a uniform code of good practice, something that we would all agree to abide by. But number 2, we needed an independent third party. This couldn't be each other in an informal basis, looking after each other. The reality is fellowship directors turnover, graduate program directors turnover, and unless there's an organization bearing this standard, there's always going to be the risk whenever there's turnover, whenever there's other organizational priorities, that this doesn't get the attention it needs. This leads us to 2015. 2015, we had a number of graduate programs and a number of fellowship sites across the country step forward to say, all right, we're ready to do this. We're going to subscribe to a uniform application date, a uniform offer date, and a set of reasonable expectations on the part of everyone involved in this process, students, graduate programs, fellowship sites, to be working together towards a set of standards that will work well for everybody. We pursued that successfully. Thankfully, I won't say everything went perfectly and every possible thing went as well as it could, but the general consensus was the experiment worked. And where that's led us today, and we'll talk about this in just a few minutes, is to the next iteration in NCAF's evolution, which is the implementation of a centralized application system. So again, final quick thing I want to say here, NCHL, while it's the home of NCAF, we're thankful to be receiving A lot of collaborative support from both CAMI and AUPHA, who both also see the value and importance of postgraduate administrative fellowships. So one of the things that we started to do, and again, we follow a very member-driven agenda. What we do as the NCAF team is we convene the NCAF members, we get a consensus on the direction forward, and then we go out and we support those directions. One of the things that we started to do is collect graduate student survey feedback on how the process is going. This was particularly important for us in this year where we implemented the Code of Good Practice for the first time. You can see some of the kinds of questions that were asked on this survey, and what we wanted to bring your attention to here was some of the more telling quotes that we got, and I think this really builds the head of steam for why we're pursuing the centralized application service. I'm not going to read through each of these for you, but again, if you're concerned about student experience and you want this process to work well for the applicants, we still have some heavy lifts to do here. You see the top one, I spent 20 to 30 hours on each application, reinventing the wheel every time, the sense of non-value added steps in the process. The one in the middle, uniform offer date, was extremely beneficial, but there were a number of organizations that were not under this process. They said, we'll wait and see. We'll see how this goes. Maybe we'll check it out again in a year and the like. So we still have students feeling very caught in the middle. They've got, they want to support the uniform process, but if not everybody's playing, the student gets stuck between a rock and a hard place on some of these kinds of things. And then the last ones you can see here, wish there was one online application process rather than having to send electronic and or physical documents to each individual site. We heard about expense associated with the request for individual transcripts, the mailing costs, if you're towards the last minute or waiting for letters towards the last minute, the FedEx costs and the like, not to mention all the time and effort that goes into putting these together. They could potentially be streamlined with an automated process. So just give you a quick look here. This is NCAF's organizing structure. What you see is 4 subcommittees and a steering committee. Each of these is populated typically by about somewhere between 12 and at the high end of 15 member organizations, both the graduate programs and the fellowship sites on each of these. The largest right now is this application process improvement, just because there's so much work going on in there getting the centralized application system ready. So just to give you a little bit of a picture, this is what our membership group currently looks like. We've got 33 graduate programs as current members, 55 health systems as current members. For those of you who have been following the NCAF story for a while, you'll recognize that this is a 22% uptick from this time last year. So the organization is continuing to grow. We anticipate a lot of interest and enthusiasm coming out of the annual ACHE Congress meeting. We do tend to get a whole lot of awareness built up at that meeting, which is terrific. Just to give you a quick look, there will be no test on this at the end, but we've got 33 graduate programs there participating, and then our 55 health systems also participating. And just a quick note, this is a quick zip code run, so you take a place like Trinity or Mayo or Cleveland Clinic or the like that might have multiple sites within the system. That's just showing where the primary is. But there's actually much more even of a national reach than what you're seeing here. So what does it mean to be an NCAF member? It means lots of things, but a couple that I want to highlight. The one is that you agree to sign off and abide by our Code of Good Practice. Code is available on the website. It's available through Renata, and it spells out what we're all agreeing to do to make the fellowship process work better for everyone. So that's part one. Part two, again, this is a very volunteer-driven organization with a volunteer membership structure. It's engaging actively throughout the year. So just really quickly, Code of Good Practice, some of the stuff that was put in place, the one that we tend to highlight just because it's the one that requires the most focal attention is the uniform application and offer dates. There's also some guidelines around decision window For the applicants, there's some expectations around only holding one offer, not holding a multitude of offers, so that they can be let out to others who may be interested, and it's to make the whole process work more efficiently. There is also contained in the Code of Good Practice a lot of professional standards that the members generated and the members agreed to, and I encourage you to take a look at them. A lot of fellowship sites have said, well, okay, this makes sense. This should be, everyone should be doing this. And we say, well, yeah, that's the point. Is we want to all agree that this is sort of the basic standards for the code. So some of the benefits you see here, and I just want to breeze through a couple of these in the interest of time. We've got collaborating, sharing of best practices, and networking. Supporting students, this is a particular important one for the graduate programs. Access to the Centralized Application Service and benchmarking of key organizational metrics. So just to hit a couple of these really quick, we're doing a lot of work trying to get a broader pipeline of communication across the members. The members have said this is really valuable. There's not been a platform for these organizations to talk about their experiences and to share how they do things before. So we run webinars. We have a face-to-face member meeting that happens during ACHE week. We have fellow sessions. There's a monthly newsletter now that Renata and colleagues put together. And there are leadership development opportunities for our participants in the form of the shared governance and other activities that we do, such as this webinar. So the big news in 2016 is the Centralized Application System, or NCAF as it's called. We are partnered with Liaison International on this one, and Liaison International is an organization that is doing a lot of these types of activities. They work with SOFIS, the public health group. They're a known quantity. They're a trusted partner that we're excited to be working with. Just to give you a quick glimpse at some of the technology and what it looks like, if you compare what you're seeing here to the typical, either the web-based, by email or the by mail process, this is a much more streamlined structure, and it's something that people can pursue with a lot less time and effort in implementation. So benchmarking and metrics, there's a lot of interest in the group on data. Data have also not been available in any consistent fashion for administrative fellowships. And the fellowship programs in particular, if you have an uptick, if you have a downtick in applications or conversions or the like, very helpful to know, is this unique to my organization? Is it unique to the region? Or is this something that nationally we're feeling an impact of? If it's something nationally, what should we be doing collectively? Again, we've got the graduate programs under the tent as well to promote fellowship opportunities or understand why there aren't more students interested in them. Flip side, organizations doing well with these kinds of things, we want to share these practices so that we can be learning from each other and the like. And then finally, ultimately, of course, the student experience, which is something that we all care about in terms of supporting their growth and their development over time. So just a quick look at some of the example types of data that we collect. We're going to be trending over time, percent of students applying to administrative fellowships coming out of the programs, perceived importance of fellowship attributes. These are the kinds of things that a fellowship program director can then use to say, okay, well, we want to strengthen in the following areas, be it exposure to certain types of activities, project-based types of things, the opportunity to interface with senior executive leadership or the like. We'll have a lot more opportunity for custom design, for input into designing of your fellowship to be best in class. But that's enough for me. I'm really eager for you to hear from a couple of our NCAF members, and I'm really grateful that Sue Boren and A.J. Dunn have agreed, given all that they do for NCAF already, to also join us on this call to talk about their own experiences. I think we've got Sue going first. So what I'd like to do now is turn things over to Sue Boren from the University of Missouri.
Hi, thank you. I'm Sue Boren, and I'm an associate professor and director of academic programs at the University of Missouri, and I enjoy working with our graduate students as they develop professionally and seek fellowship opportunities and jobs. So at the University of Missouri, our curriculum focuses on the knowledge and skills to be successful in the healthcare market. We offer our MHA program in both executive and residential formats, and we also have opportunities for dual degrees in business, law, industrial engineering, and health informatics. All of our students complete Lean Six Sigma training and earn a green belt, and 100% of our students are placed in summer internships. Also, 100% of our graduates obtain either administrative fellowships or are employed in healthcare full-time within 3 months of graduation. I will share with you now our experience in 2015 and then also what we're looking forward to in 2016. So our experience in 2015 was great. Having a uniform application deadline in October provides our students with the time that they need to complete their summer internship and settle into the fall semester and prepare their fellowship applications before the deadline. And then with a uniform offer date in November, that allows our students time to interview with organizations before receiving offers and responding to those offers. This provides our students with time to be knowledgeable about the opportunities and make a well-educated decision about those. Another benefit from 2015 was being able to share experiences with other master's programs on this topic of fellowship and post-graduation opportunities. Historically, about 50% of our students seek fellowship opportunities, and usually 1/3 of our students in our class of about 30 graduates each year move forward to complete fellowships. We currently have 3 graduates who are completing fellowships with NCAF member organizations, including Mayo, Johns Hopkins, and Rush. And in July 2016, 3 more of our graduates will begin fellowships with NCAF member organizations. So looking forward to 2016, the uniform application process is the big thing that my graduate students are looking forward to this year because it will really help them efficiently use their time to prepare applications, and it will also help improve the efficiency of faculty time in providing recommendation letters that are needed for those and in helping students craft the best application package possible. And now I will move on to A.J. Dunn.
All right. Thank you, Sue. So again, I'm A.J. Dunn. I serve as the Associate Administrator for Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, Florida, with responsibility for our medicine, medical specialty, and genomics practices. And I also provide administrative leadership for the fellowship program, which is a 2-year leadership development program that we view as a fast track to transition some of the top graduate students in healthcare administration into operations management positions. And certainly some of our graduating fellows will go into planning roles, finance roles, systems engineering roles, but our intent, and probably over 90+% of our students or fellows finish and end up taking frontline management roles as operations managers, either in education, research, or in clinical operations. And the way that we prepare people to go from the classroom into these leadership positions is through significant investment in mentoring, stretch assignments, and leadership experiences, with a highlight and a focus on having people work in interim roles. And so people have opportunities. If someone's out on a maternity leave or if there's turnover in a leadership position, we'll often throw a fellow into an interim assignment. And we do this because we know that we need to build the bench strength of future leaders, and we also need to enhance the diversity of our leadership team. And so each year, and we've done this since 1983, we typically will look to fill somewhere between 5 to 6 fellows across our system, again in Arizona and Florida and Rochester, Minnesota, and we do that by processing usually each year somewhere around 200 to 250 applications. And we've got a really firm commitment to retain, and over the past 20 plus years we've had about a 91% retention rate wherein the fellows take their first post-fellowship position within the Mayo Clinic. And so that's the framework from which I come and from which I entered the NCAF sort of organization, really excited about the opportunity to advance the profession. But admittedly, there were some concerns. Would membership in NCAF in any way hurt our ability to meet our mission? And so here's just some reflections from the prior year's experience. First, we had a 28% increase in applicants in 2015 compared to 2014, and we think part of that has to do with just the broader visibility that our program had as people went into NCAF and looked to see what were the options. You know, Mayo Clinic was prominently listed there along with all of the other programs, and we think that that increased visibility helped us. The other thing that we were concerned about was the fact that as we standardized around the standard interview and offer cycle, that would hurt us. And we had 12 spots on site for interviews for those 5 slots that we offered last year. And we actually had 2 people decline our interview offers because they were taking positions in non-NCAF opportunities. One was a consulting position and one was actually a fellowship program that was not in the NCAF system. But from perspective, we have this happen almost every year. So every year there is this constant arms race of people moving their interview dates earlier and earlier and earlier. And so losing out on 2 candidates from our final round of interviews was essentially par for the course. So there was no degradation in terms of the number of candidates lost. And so we actually ended up offering 14 slots for on-site interviews in order to be able to fill the 12 slots. But it was a positive experience. We went through the process. The single offer day was significantly less chaotic than it normally is, and we were able to fill our 5 slots by making 6 offers. So of our top 5 candidates, we had 4 people accept, 1 declined, and so we went to our number 6 candidate of the 12 that we interviewed. So for us, that was successful, and it was really a very positive experience. And as we think about the benefits of NCAF membership beyond just what we've talked about, I think that the centralized application processing system that Andy referenced is, I believe, a game changer. And so we saw significant value, both from our own experience and then just for what it means for the profession last year before this application system was in place. And I think with this in place, the value proposition for NCAF exponentially increases. As I think about it, again, I think it's really necessary for us to collectively work on ending the arms race of people moving the cycles earlier and earlier and earlier to be able to compete. And essentially, as I think about NCAF membership, the cost of membership really is trivial. The energy involved in being a member of NCAF is, again, trivial. It's not like there is a significant burden to be involved. So really the decision that I think faces most organizations is whether there's a desire to commit to collectively work to improve and elevate the profession by giving up a slight bit of autonomy, i.e. not being able to just randomly make your selection of the dates for your interviews, but to do so in a collective way, so you give up some autonomy to be able to advance the greater good. Or conversely, because the cost really isn't an issue, the time involved isn't an issue, one can choose to strategically opt out of the collective good to be able to say, I want to give my individual organization a small bit of competitive advantage by undercutting the rest of the industry. And ultimately, I think that's a choice. And as students and as the rest of the profession looks at the people who have either said, the profession means enough to me that I'm willing to stand with the rest of the community to advance our profession, or I want to go rogue and be able to pick off candidates by undercutting my competition and going a couple days earlier, I think that that means something, and I think that the organizations that stand with the NCAF brand have taken the higher road, and ultimately I think that that branding of NCAF, that commitment to the profession means something and will actually accrue benefit to organizations that have said, you know, doing something that's greater than myself is important. And I think that that will resonate with the kind of people that go into healthcare leadership, which again is a service industry, which is all about serving others. And so I think ultimately this whole branding thing will be something that's important. And finally, I think I would say that the peer-to-peer opportunities with NCAF may be the hidden gem that none of us really see on the front end, but 20 years from now when Andy's writing the paper that talks about the history of NCAF and the impact it's had over its 20 years, I think the opportunity for fellows to be able to be a part of the NCAF system and then work together to share ideas, for programs to be able to share curriculum, to share content, to have fellow exchange programs, I suspect that that will ultimately be some of the strongest value that we perceive from the system. So with that as just a brief overview of our organization, our first year's worth of experience, and then just reflections on the benefits, I'd like to transition back to Renata to close out the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, AJ, and thank you, Sue. I think that was really helpful to see some of the insights of actually being a member from both the graduate health management as well as the fellowship perspective. So I know some of you were asking, what is the cost to be an NCAF member? So it's an annual organizational membership fee of $880, and that includes everything as far as the centralized application service, all the peer-to-peer learning and collaboration. It's all included in that member fee. As Andy mentioned, the one thing that members are required to do is abide and sign off on the Code of Good Practice. And again, we've listed the dates that we abide by on this slide. If you're interested in applying for membership, there is a link here that you can click on and fill out a form. It'll just have the Code of Good Practice, so you can read through it, sign off, and then to assign contacts for your organization. So these are some of the NCAF dates that we have in place. As Andy and AJ and Sue mentioned, we have a lot of collaborative efforts. So in the next week, we will have a fellow session on March 14th, and that will be a panel of former fellows who will be kind of reflecting back on their experiences, what they've learned, talking to current NCAF fellows about how to best leverage what they're learning during their fellowship. And then the current fellows will also get an opportunity to network within themselves, which is something they've often asked for. The next day, we will have our all NCAF member meeting. Some of our members will be sharing best practices during that meeting. We have Tom Vaughn from University of Iowa, who will be talking about closing communication loops between the fellowship programs and the graduate health management programs. So how to take feedback from after the fellows have completed their cycle to then give back to the graduate programs to better their student learning, as well as for the fellowship programs to then assess what the students need to build their skills. So we talked about the centralized application system. NCAF will be hosting NAFCAS training sessions for anybody that is signed on to participate. And only NCAF members are allowed to participate on that service. I don't know if that was said during this webinar yet. And then on April 15th, continuing the leadership development theme, we're going to have Peter Butler, president of Rush University Medical Center, talking about how to navigate the professional terrain and some lessons learned during his career. The big date for the centralized application system will be July 19th. That's when it actually will open up for students to be able to apply and create their profiles. So we're really looking forward to that. It's been an exciting opportunity to build it, and we're very excited for July 19th to come around.
Hey, Renata, thank you very much. And AJ and Sue, I want to underscore something AJ said, which is about the peer-to-peer sharing. The folks you heard on the call are the kinds of folks that you get to meet as a part of this NCAF group, and they're a pretty fantastic group, very oriented towards building the profession. I can't say enough nice things about them. We do have some questions that have come in. We're going to start teeing them up now so that myself or for the other NCAF NCHL staff can do our best to answer them.
I think we'll start by going through the questions we've received in the Q&A box, and we'll have AJ and Sue jump into if they're able to answer them. And then we will unmute the phone line and take questions from anybody participating on the call.
One of the questions that we had in the Q&A box was, is there an NCAF recommended interview process in terms of the number of rounds where the programs go through a number of rounds of interviews? So I will leave that either to AJ or Sue or Andy or Renata as they would like to respond to that.
So I can get us started. The Code of Good Practice does not specify a set of rounds. In our experience, the practice tends to be a phone screen followed by an on-site. That seems to be the dominant form factor that we're seeing. I don't know if AJ or Sue, you have anything you want to add to that?
No, agree.
I agree.
I'll mention that NCAF will be starting to collect prompted once-a-month questions to our membership and collecting that information, aggregating it, and then sharing it back. So this is similar to these type of questions where we just are wondering what's out there, what others are doing. We'll be prompting that to our membership and collecting information and then giving it back to our members so they can better assess their program.
We have also had a question regarding students, asking about students at non-NCAF schools and whether or not they will be able to apply to NCAF fellowships. And I presume this is through the NAFCAS system. And any student can apply to a NAFCAS, to a fellowship program that is listed in NAFCAS. Only NCAF member fellowships can post their positions on NAFCAS, so you have to be a member fellowship site to be able to post your positions for students to find. But any student may apply to those positions, no matter whether they come from an NCAF graduate program or not. So Vincent, if that doesn't answer your question fully, please let us know.
I would like to quickly add, just based upon our 2015 experience and underscoring what AJ said about the common good component, is the fellowship sites who participated really appreciated the work that the graduate program members did in preparing their students, helping them understand how the fellowship process works, helping them understand the standards of professional comport and behavior. And so some of those are spelled out in the Code of Good Practice. What we're going to try to do is, for graduate programs that are not involved, unfortunately it's going to be up to the fellowship site to do a little bit of education with those students, but we're also trying to promote the code more broadly so that student applicants understand, kind of the basics of how they should be thinking about and conducting themselves in these processes.
So then there is another question. This is Joyce Anwanio. There's another question regarding, have you considered a road show to bring NCAF story to other locations like those of us on the left coast? So what we have been trying to do and will be doing as we learn about them is I know we will be out on the East Coast for the Yale New Haven is having a session with fellowship sites there, so we'll be there answering questions and talking to folks. We'll be doing that again, or we'll do that again next week in Chicago when folks are here for the ACHE session. And our hope is if folks are able to let us know when there are fellowship events happening or if they're interested in having conversations with us and bringing a group together, we're happy to do that in a more regional way as well. So if there are folks that are in the New York region or California that would like to pull other sites together to have this conversation, we're happy to do that. So we're doing as much outreach as we can, but we also count on our members as well as just the field talking to each other to let people know we exist and the work we're doing.
And just to quickly underscore something that Joyce Ann was saying, what's worked really well for NCAF so far is members posing questions like yourselves and then partnering with us to find those opportunities to bring together a network of fellowships that maybe are in the same market for the same students. Frequently, it's to that group's benefit to have a conversation amongst each other and make a group decision. Might this be something that's helpful to us here on the left coast? We're very happy to partner on that. On the one hand. On the other hand, we are dedicated to keeping the membership costs as efficient as we can, and so we do run a very lean staff, and our capacity for doing independent outreach is limited. So we do count on our members to help us in identifying those opportunities to bring folks together around this common mission.
There's another question that we had around whether NCAF members, organizations that are not currently on steering committees or subgroups within NCAF, are there opportunities for these organizations to participate in the discussion or influence the conversation around application processes, events, and membership data with NCAF? Go ahead.
Well, go ahead.
I was going to say you have no choice, but it's a very member-driven activity. We got some questions from groups that joined after we set up the first committee structure, and about how you get on these things. You get on them by raising your hand. It's a very open structure. We're continuously encouraging involvement because it's really only through your perspectives that we're able to build a program and an operation that's going to meet your needs.
And I'll say I get calls every day from members who have ideas or opportunities for NCAF to add value. So we always take those into consideration and bring it back to the subcommittees. It's really helpful to have everyone kind of involved.
We also got a similar question. Do you conduct a needs assessment with directors of administrative fellowships in healthcare to discuss much-needed data and metrics? So go ahead and respond.
Sure. So Casey is looking at me only because she's about to go on maternity leave. Casey leads the benchmarking and metrics subcommittee, which is one of the subcommittees that we have under that structure. We do now have in place a survey, an annual survey for fellowship program directors, for graduate program directors, and we also, for the first time this year, at the graduate program's request, pushed one out to the graduate programs that they could send along to their students. There is, I think with a lot of benchmarking efforts, there's more enthusiasm about getting the data at the back end than there are necessarily a commitment to everybody participating in the survey process itself. So that's kind of the heavy lift we're working with right now. It's to AJ's point of convincing everybody that if we all participate in this data collection effort, the quality of the data that we all have to work with is much better. So, I mean, the quick answer is yes, but we call it, I think, a work in progress.
We've received several questions about the $32 application fee. So for those students who are interested in applying to fellowship programs, the cost to use NAFCAS to apply to a program is $32 per application. That fee was set through a lot of conversations, a lot of discussions, both at the application improvement process group as well as the steering committee level, as well as conversations with current fellows and the like. It is a fee that was set to hopefully not be a barrier to entry for any student who is interested in applying to a fellowship program, but it was also set because there's a realization that there is a lot of time and money already being spent on applying to administrative fellowship programs, whether that be requesting multiple transcripts, which would not be required any longer. A student would be able to request one transcript, to having to FedEx materials in to a site. And so there was a great deal of conversation. So the goal was also not to have it so low that students might apply more willy-nilly to sites because it's less time consuming to do so. So there has been a lot of discussion around that amount, and it will probably continue. But for this coming year, the fee is $32 per application. we're hoping that that works for both the students in terms of cost, as well as it's saving them a great amount of time in terms of tracking down recommendations, ordering transcripts, and so on.
And if a site has multiple fellowship positions, they're able to post so that the student only pays once and then can in the specific program page designate which sites or fellowship positions they're applying for. So we have Trinity, who's a member, for example, and they have about 12 to 13 every year. The students who want to apply to all Trinity fellowship positions would only pay one fee, and then in the Trinity page would then designate which fellowship sites they want to apply to.
We have another question that says, can you talk a little bit more about specific peer-to-peer activities that occurred last year? And yes, we can.
Right. So the Membership and Growth Subcommittee actually spends a lot of time talking about ways that we can answer questions that we get from the various sites, as well as what are the learning opportunities that we can do across all the different membership groups. So, for example, last year there were a couple of sites that were interested in how did fellowship sites meet do the interview, the review of the applications, the interview process, and make a offer within that 6 weeks time frame that was set by the Code of Good Practice. They wanted to understand that better because their process was taking them a lot longer. And through that, we were able to pull together several sites, large, small, and to talk with them. And so there was a great deal of sharing about what does our process look like, how do we make these decisions, how do we move through the process. And so there's that individualized peer-to-peer that we can make happen, as well as we do a quarterly basis, at least, an all NCAF call where we share some information across all the sites there. As well as the face-to-face that we'll be doing next week. And then in terms of fellows who are peers, we have started and we'll be doing our third leadership webinar for NCAF fellows. And so we pick a topic and have a speaker, and they come together to have that learning opportunity, which has not really presented itself in the past. So this has been one way of being able to allow NCAF fellows to also learn. So we had done a session on quality where Kaiser Permanente helped with that presentation. We did another one on culture of health with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and we have another one coming up in April to talk about your creating your career path. And so as well, we also have a face-to-face for NCAF fellows next week here in Chicago. So it's an opportunity that we think is going to continue to grow, where peers will be able to have the opportunity to share and learn from each other. This is not something that had been available in the past. There was no organization kind of helping to bring together fellowship programs, graduate programs, and fellows in this way.
Casey, any other?
There's a couple that I hope you've seen as the response has gone out to everybody around applications. I will just respond to this instead of type it here, since there's a moment to talk. There was a question that says, like the undergraduate Common App, can individual organizations add unique application components such as an essay? And yes, absolutely. There is a program-specific page within NAFCAS where all sites are able to request any additional information that they desire from their applicants. So, for example, many of our sites may be requesting additional personal statements or essays from their applicants. And so, yes, you can request anything in addition that you'd like to. As you can see on the screen, there's that bottom right-hand quadrant that's called Program Materials. That's where the applicant will see program-specific materials that are requested by any of the applications, fellowship sites that they've sent applications into. Katie, if that doesn't answer your question, please let us know.
AJ and Sue, do you have any comments about the peer-to-peer learning or the centralized application service?
Sure. The only thing I would say about the peer-to-peer learning is that we've had, in addition to the sessions where fellows can get together and work on things. We've also had some discussions about some fellow exchanges between other sites that may have programs, so that if there's a fellow in a rural community setting who wants to get an experience with a metropolitan site, that will be able to do some of those exchanges. It's preliminary, but some of the things that we've talked about. And then ultimately, I could easily see 2 to 3 years from now where a fellow in the Mayo Clinic system, the Cleveland Clinic system, Duke, Hopkins, wherever, have content that they're getting exposed to on data analytics in Excel, or content related to finance that's common across the industry, and so that over time we can start to develop core content that doesn't need to be replicated at each of the sites, but that can be developed across all of the NCAF systems that are institution agnostic. Those, I think, are the opportunities that really present themselves as value added that wouldn't be available to people that aren't in NCAF programs.
Yeah, AJ, I'm glad you mentioned that. That is something that NCHL, the parent organization, does a lot of on behalf of leadership development activities in our member organizations. And it's something that our member organizations have been very excited about. And we see this as a very natural and pretty exciting extension of the opportunities that this peer network is creating for the NCAF members. Thank you.
We have, Sue, did you have any comments?
I was just going to add that on the graduate program side, this peer-to-peer learning comes about from the various programs talking about how we can better support and prepare our students for fellowships.
Terrific. Thank you, Sue. Okay, we got a left coast. Do you have plans for pushing the envelope with a future perfect vision of AFP executive development so we can take our programs to the next level? That kind of thing is the type of conversation that we love to have. What I would say is if you think about phase 1 of NCAF is getting the organization established. Phase 2 as the centralized application system, which is kind of our big marquee heavy lift for this year. I would love to see a year 3 around, okay, where does this, where should fellowships be 10 years from now, and how might we get there? I think that's a pretty exciting concept. You know, we have a number of our clinical colleagues and other disciplines that have some structures that we can learn from, not design around, but take what works and come up with our own around what doesn't. I appreciate the question, and would love to see you be a part of it.
I don't see any other questions on the Q&A box. I can open up the line if anybody wants to ask AJ or Sue or anybody on the NCAF team a question.
The conference is now unmuted.
This also might be a time when some of you are running, not encouraging you to, but before you sign off, I want to thank you again for the time you spent with us today learning more about NCAF. Renata's very eager to answer additional questions that you may have, but we do have a couple more minutes, so if folks have more questions, please post them.
Hello, this is Beth Lum. I'm the left coast. I just wanted to thank you for an outstanding webinar. This is really exciting, and I'll be talking to my organization about joining. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Beth. We look forward to having you involved.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you so much for a great webinar. It looks like a great way to streamline the fellowship process. I myself actually was a fellow now almost a year ago. I'm currently Director of Oncology Services at Jersey City Medical Center. So without a fellowship, I can attest that I would never really get a fast-track my career that way. The only issue or the only little area of concern that I have is really for me would be the $32 application fee per application for the student, largely because I think that might be a barrier. Here at Jersey City Medical Center is our 4th class of fellows, and every year we have a diverse group of students that we host. And I will be very honest, I don't think with the amount of applications that I had applied to that I could have applied to applications for a $32 application fee. Nowadays, since largely you don't mail anything in anymore. Really, it's minuscule fee for, the transcript. So I will definitely be bringing this up to senior leadership as we are invested in our program here. However, that is an area that I do foresee just from a personal and from an access perspective being an issue.
That's a great point, and thank you for pointing that out. The centralized application service, we want our members to participate, but it's not a requirement. So if you want to participate and post on the centralized application system, you could also accept applications via an online portal or have email submissions or mail submissions. You're still able to do a hybrid model in that sense or not participate at all. So if you do feel like that is a burden, we completely understand because we do not want students to feel burdened by the price. So you're able to do both methods.
Excellent, thank you.
Just to add to what Renata is saying, this is an issue where there has been, as Joyce Ann said, a lot of discussion, and ultimately what we're going to need to do is run the experiment, collect the data, and see what the impact is, which we absolutely want to make sure that we do. Everything that we're doing is an effort to push administrative fellowships forward in terms of excellence, professionalism, interest, enthusiasm from the field. We have heard a number of folks on the flip side say if they had something like this available to them, it would have saved them the level of time and effort in terms of whatever part-time job that they were working at the time or the like, that they felt like it was worthwhile. But, I honestly, probably individual results vary. So this is what the members felt like was optimal. So we're going to see how it goes, but it's not set in stone for eternity. We're going to see what the impact is.
Thank you.
Perfect question.
Okay, I think we're approaching the top of the hour. Okay, thank you again, everybody. AJ, Sue, thank you again so much for sharing your perspectives and your time with us. Thank you, everyone, for joining the call today, and thank you, NCHL staff, for all of their hard work on this NCAF